Okay, I think we're live now.
All right.
Yeah. Let me just confirm my LinkedIn. Um, my LinkedIn. Um, okay. All right. I think we're live. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody who's tuning into this discussion today. Tuning into another episode of Now with the Manager Live podcast. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening from wherever you're joining us from today. I'm Ubong Matthew, your host for Now with the Manager Live podcast. And as usual, I'm going to be here for as long as possible. But I'm always happy to be here today. But today I'm joined here by a very distinguished guest who will share in-depth information on the topic on how important, right, we need to build a collaborative network in our organizations, right? And that's in person of Dr. Robyn Rushing, who will share more insight on us. Good to have you on the show today, Doctor.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I'm really looking forward to discussing our topic today and sharing some insights with our listeners.
Thank you very much. And to everybody who's here, if you're yet to share this link across with your connections or with your network, please do well to hit that subscribe button. Do well to share the link, copy the link on YouTube, copy the link on LinkedIn here, share it across, put it on your WhatsApp status, share with your friends, send it as email to your employer or to your boss. Tell them, hey, boss, please, there's a show you need to watch by this time, by 8 p.m. Let's learn how to build a collaborative environment together. Let's see how to foster positive growth. Because we've been having very wonderful discussions over time. And today we want to build more into that discussion and see how to lead a successful business life today. And to everyone who's here today, if you have any question, any comments or any contributions you might want to send in, please send it to the comment box, or you can as well share with me directly in my DM, and I'll always be available to respond to you. Or probably you can reach out to Unwana Akpabio. I think that's our social media manager. So she'll be dropping a message in the comment box so that you can as well drop in or send in your questions. And trust me, our guest today would help us answer or do justice to those questions today. Okay, so on the discussion on how to build a collaborative network in our organization, which is a very, very interesting discussion, right? Before today, we've had conversation on succession planning. On the Now with the Manager Live podcast, we've talked about employee benefits. We've talked about team development. We've had discussions on the role of follow-up, which are all very key aspects that we need to look at. But when you put all of this process together, you've built a good succession plan. You've built a good. You're able to follow up. How do you maintain that energy? How do you maintain that process? How do you also make your employees who you're working with also see the benefit of them being there? And even if they have to leave the organization tomorrow, but they'll be very comfortable living there and always looking back to say, oh, Mr. A did a very good thing for me in my life, even if not 100%, but you were able to also be a part of their success story, in as much as they are also part of the organization's success story. So today, our guest, Robyn, will help us do justice to that and carry us through that journey. Trust me, it's going to be a very interesting ride. So please keep your pen ready, keep your water ready, or your shot of tequila, or your cocktail, whatever you have to keep it ready. Keep it ready. Let's have a very wonderful discussion today. Thank you very much, everybody. Dr. Robyn, talking about the discussion on collaboration, right? Before we move in straight to this, please tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what you've been doing for the past 20 years. And finally, how you've been able to birth HG Blackmon Limited Liability Company. Thank you.
Yes, so I actually started my career in healthcare. I became a respiratory therapist very early on, and I knew that I wanted to help people. And as I worked in that environment, one of the things that became very clear to me was that I didn't always have the type of leadership that I felt was the most beneficial. I didn't always have leaders that I thought brought out the best in myself or my colleagues. And I wanted to find a way to remedy that. And so I began to go back to school, definitely to get more academic training, but also began to take on additional roles within the hospitals that I worked for. I eventually became a hospital CEO. I ran, did provider relations for 25 hospitals in 12 states. I actually ran large multinational facilities, and really began to learn more about what it's like to lead, what it is that you think leadership is and what it isn't, and how you can become a leader that people will want to follow and people will feel good about. And that, to me, that's the goal of leadership, is to build more leaders and to help people grow and to develop. And one of the things that I think that we can do as leaders within any organization is to learn how to enable our employees, along with our peers, to collaborate, to communicate well, and to do those things. I think that we have to communicate clear vision, and I think that that's one of the things that I learned as I was working in hospitals, was communicating a clear vision so that I could get buy-in from all of my individual employees or my boards of directors. And as I worked through those things over the years, I began to take consulting roles. So I would consult for other organizations, and I did a lot of turnarounds. I did a lot of investigative work when it came to leadership development and operational improvements. And so that led to H.G. Blackman Consultants. So I eventually moved from the healthcare space into the consulting world, which is what I currently do now. And we have both our LLC, which is our consultancy, and then we have our 501c3, which is Connected Pathways Network, in which we help promote disenfranchised or maybe individuals who wouldn't normally have opportunities for work. We help them find work. So whether they're neurodiverse, maybe they're veterans, maybe they have physical or cognitive disabilities, but we help them find their place within society and help them find a way to become more independent. So between the consulting world and trying to help build better leadership and better organizational processes toward helping through the nonprofit side, helping individuals who couldn't find work before find those organizations who are willing to do those extra steps and to be more collaborative, I've kind of brought those pieces together.
Wow. Well, how did that make you feel, realizing that, oh, this is where your journey is taking you through?
Pardon me?
How did the experience so far make you feel that, oh, this is where my journey is actually pushing me to? Because I know that you didn't just wake up to decide you want to become a consultant or maybe have a company or something.
Well, actually, in the last few years, especially after COVID, there were so many issues within corporate spaces, so many issues with leadership and the way that we were managing employees and what that looked like. It really prompted me to want, again, to help. I've always wanted to help people. That's what brought me into healthcare to begin with. And one of the things that I learned through that time in the healthcare industry was that I could help people even outside of the healthcare industry. And I think that really prompted me as I began to see other organizations who had similar issues, but maybe could actually correct those issues in a little bit different formats. It really began to promote that thought process in me that said, you know what, you can take these things that you've done and been able to do well within the healthcare environment and move them out into other organizations and help other people take those skill sets and the knowledge that you have and use that in their own work life and in their own organization to make them better. And I think that was a lot of the prompting that I had was, as I worked year to year, as my roles changed, as I began to see bigger companies, bigger opportunities, bigger things happening within my healthcare space, it began to correlate in my mind with the fact that other organizations had very similar sets of circumstances that could also benefit from that information and from the consulting opportunities that I had. And so it began to be, for years, I always wondered, why my career had taken the turns that it had. I had gone from healthcare. I went into neurobehavioral medicine. I created new companies, new visions, new residential centers. I did all of these different things and didn't really understand why my path was being laid out the way it was. It was like I would take one step to learn something new. I think each opportunity that I had to learn a different aspect of maybe the organizations that I was part of, or maybe to learn something new altogether, I took those on. So sometimes I would take a job for half the money, but just so that I could learn something new. And I discovered in going through that process that I could share that information and that it could help more than just me and more than just one company. It could help maybe many people and many organizations so that they could become their very best, so that they could achieve the goals that they wanted to be, so that they could be not only successful, but sustainable. And I found that to be very important. I think that that's something that's just really part of the passion that I have for what I do, is seeing other people grow and other people develop. And I think that that's by far the highest calling that I have had, is to help others become better and to help them become and to fulfill their own dreams and to see their own companies grow and do well.
I think while you help them to fulfill their own dreams, you also fulfill your own dreams too.
Yeah, definitely.
Of course.
Definitely.
Thank you very much for that. And you just hit a point talking about learning even when you're getting half the pay. I just referenced that to a discussion last week, a live podcast, even though the internet actually affected us, where our guest Justina spoke about continuous learning, right? Having to be able to freely volunteer, right?
Right.
Go out to volunteer and ask, oh, I would like to do this, I'd like to put up with this. But so far, in all of the things you've done for the past 20 years, and even outside of the years of your career years, why do you think the discussion on collaboration for organizational success, why do you think this discussion today is very important for our listeners who are joining us for the first time here today?
Well, I think collaboration and collaboration networking is so important because we are in a different space. We aren't where we were 15 years ago, where everybody goes into the same office and maybe it's the one business in the one city doing one certain thing. We're much more of a global environment. And when you are global in nature and you have people working from multiple facilities, maybe multiple countries, collaboration is key in making sure that you're able to not only work well within the organization, that you can bring all of those talents and resources and that you can have that continuous learning that's necessary. That collaboration is essential to making sure that you are prolific and in front of and top of mind for the clients, the consumers that you're trying to reach with your product or service. And I think that the better that we can collaborate within our organization, the better we're able to collaborate with those who are outside of that organization. The better that we can provide communication, learning within, so that we can then take what we've learned and express that outwardly. Helps us bring in partnerships, helps us bring in maybe a broader scope of consumers for the products and services that we have. But collaboration is a key. And the better that we can work together, the more innovative that we can be, the more opportunities there are to have a broad range and more quick style of decision making. If we are all the same and we're all doing the same thing every day, then that opportunity for creativity, innovation, and rapid decision making is lessened. If we can collaborate, bring our differences together, as we collaborate with our different perspectives, then there is that much greater opportunity to take what we've always done and do it better, to maybe advance it to something even bigger than what it was before, and the better way in which we can communicate that and drive that forward, and as I said before, in a really sustainable way. So I think collaboration is key for us now in this global environment. Just as we're having this conversation today, and it is being portrayed globally for different people at different levels of management, at different levels of employment, different types of organizations, but where they can all hear and take individual pieces away that help fit where they are. And again, this is a form of collaboration. We're collaborating together with this information so that we can help make people stronger and help make our organizations better.
Thank you for that. You know, when you made the statement about how people bring that, yeah, where they bring in their differences just to be able to coexist. But you know that process is actually not, it's not very easy to bring in people from different space to think alike and still achieve the same goal through a collaborative process. How has that worked for you, or how has that worked for you? Just trying to do that whole process.
Well, I think one of the key things that I've noticed that works really well for me and even for my clients is being able to communicate a very clear vision with a very clear purpose, so that when you bring in talent and you are building teams, that they understand what it is that they're working for. And I think one of the really interesting things that I've seen in research as of late, we talk a lot about burnout and how people get lost in the job, or how they get burned out in the job. And um, a lot of people tend to assume that that is because we have so much work at one time. And what the research has shown is that it isn't necessarily the volume of work that produces burnout, but it's the lack of meaningful work. Collaboration is one way that we can help provide meaningful work. And in bringing those individuals together to do that, having that vision that's well communicated, having a purpose and a set of goals that are well communicated, so that there's buy-in and engagement from the very beginning. I think that's one of the first foundational pieces that we have to consider when we start thinking about the idea of bringing people from different perspectives and different mindsets together to collaborate. They first need to have that platform of, this is what the purpose is, this is what the goals are, this is what the vision is, and this is how I'm going to fit into that, so that they can feel comfortable in sharing their ideas about that vision and about those goals and about that purpose. That then starts a level of discussion. And I often encourage my teams to have open communication, have transparent communication, because it's through that style of communication that we get more of those ideas out there, that it helps us to then begin to understand what our common values are, what our common thoughts are, and maybe what our differences are, and approach those in a way that is not confrontational, but rather investigative, a way in which we learn about one another, so that we can collaborate, so that we can come together to achieve that vision and that purpose.
You know, when you say all of this, it sounds very simple to the ear to those who will be hearing this, and I'm like, and I'm like, yeah, Robyn, because you've had 20 years of experience, it sounds so simple. But please, can you walk us through maybe those challenges, those challenging times you had before you were able to come up with this whole initiative that, oh yes, building a solid collaborative network can actually make sense to, you know, help each individual in the team still get the benefits from what they're doing and still grow alongside with each other?
Yeah, I have a kind of just a short story. So we had a group of individuals that we wanted to build a particular product for a company that I was working for, and so we brought research and development people, we brought finance people. We thought we had all the right folks, right, to bring this product to its end result. And the reality is, they were all in different places, so they weren't in the same states. They didn't all come from our organization. Some of them had brought in from different organizations. Some of them were consultants. Some of them were. So you had all these different aspects about all these different people who had this idea of what they thought their role was, when the leader's idea of what they were all supposed to be once they came together, they were very different. And that was one of my first experiences, and that was a challenge, right? To have all these different people who came in, they knew what the purpose was, they knew what the goals were, but their idea of what their role was going to be, or what that role should look like, was very different from what maybe that leader thought that all of them should be doing. So because each of them had this different set of ideas of, okay, I'm going to produce the marketing plan, and that's the only part of this project I'm going to do. I'm going to do the finance plan, and that's the only part of this project I'm going to do. I'm going to design the product, and that's the piece. And the thing was, what we learned very quickly was, we have to learn how to get these people to talk, how to get these people to work together, how to get them to create, not just perform, but create. And um, that was a huge realization for us. We thought, well, if we bring in all these people with all these levels of expertise, they're the best in their field at this or that, they're going to come together and create this great product and we'll have it done in no time. Goodness no. It took us more time to actually build and corral that team and bring that together in a way that was worthwhile than it probably did to actually create the product once we had the team really ready. But it was the creation of that team that was a big part of it. And it took us a lot of trial and error, so to speak. And I don't know if our listeners have experienced that, but you think you've got all the right people and you've got all of this goal and it's all spread out, it's on your Gantt chart and you've got it ready to go. And then you realize they don't know how to talk to each other. They are very isolated or siloed in what it is they think they're going to produce and present. And it was a matter of us beginning to bring them together in an open dialogue. It was something different for the leader to say, this is what I want in this team, than it was for that leader to then be the example of what they wanted in that team. So it was easy to say, I want you guys to talk and to talk freely and to get to know each other better. That was different than having that leader come in and sit down and say, let me tell you about myself. Let me tell you about my background. Now I'd like to know about each of you, and have each of you tell about your backgrounds and what your interests are and how you'd like to see this. If this was just solely your part, how would you do it? That was very different. It became a very different process. That type of open communication, that transparency, and then getting them to actually communicate about, if this was solely their project, what would they see as the important pieces? How would they see that working out? And as each one of them basically gave that sort of input, then bringing that together as a group and saying, so which one of these ideas, which one of these pieces is really important for us to move as a group together to produce the best end result? And that was a huge part of developing that team. It wasn't so easy just to take the Clifton Strengths Finder from Gallup and say, well, here's all of your strengths. So I'm going to take a person with, I need these 5 strengths. So I've got people that fit these 5 things, and I'm going to put them together in a group, and they're all going to work well together. It didn't work that way. We had to find ways to open dialogue between our team members before we embarked upon the project so that we could make sure that they could work well together, so that we could make sure that they understood that this was a creative process, not just a performative one. And I think that a lot of times when we're trying to build teams, sometimes that can definitely be our hindrance, is that we think that if we bring the people with the right skill sets together, that they're automatically going to work well together and they're automatically going to produce a great product. When the reality is, if we don't do some work ahead of time in making sure that they can work well together, that we've produced an environment for them to work well together, we're not going to get the outcome that we think we are. And I think that becomes a big piece of it, is making sure that we've provided the environment and the context in which they can work together, where they can be creative together, so that they understand that they are all working together as one entity, not just as separate individual people. And I think that that's a big piece of it.
You know, when you mentioned the point of having them to come on board and say, oh, okay, this is what my JD is, and I'm only going to be doing what my JD is, forgetting that when you're working in the team, you sometimes need to explore, because it's like a learning process when you're building something, you're creating something. I really appreciate the fact that you raised that same conversation, because this is more or less like a discussion I'm having with my team in-house, right? That when you're working with the team, it goes beyond just, oh, I'm a digital marketer, or I'm a what do you call it, a graphics designer, or I'm a web developer. But sometimes you might realize that there are some things that you can learn as being a graphics designer that you might get out from working with a social media manager, and you can also get that and include that into your experience. Imagine you having your JD out of all the whole creative process, and you're like, oh, I'm a graphics designer. I also have a social media management skill attached to your name, because you learned by joining and collaborating with the team. And I'm happy you've been able to put that up. But it's not very much an easy route to take. Like you mentioned, there's so much politicking, because I think there's some sort of politicking where you have to speak with each individual. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's an approach you also use too.
Yeah, we have to definitely approach individual, and I love what you said about the peer-to-peer learning. In one of my hospitals, we did that where um, each of our department managers and executives, we basically spent 2 weeks time in another department with another manager, learning what they did to better understand how maybe our departments could work better together, to better understand what was happening in those areas, and so that we could do a better job of cross coverage. We did what in hospitals we tend to call them interdisciplinary teams, where we have teams from all over the hospital that work together to create a specific outcome. And I think in any organization, those interdisciplinary teams are beneficial, because if they will share their knowledge, which is just a huge piece of being part of a continuous learning environment. But if the peers will share their knowledge with one another, you not only do both of those individuals grow, but the organization grows in the scope and depth of information and product and service that they can provide. And I think that that's huge. So I think that that's a great point that you make about being able to learn from one another, seeing the value in the work that someone else does, even if you're like, no, I'm a nurse, I don't need to know what the scrub tech does. It's like, well, you might, because what happens if the scrub tech faints and then there you are? Well, it might be beneficial. So yes, you can definitely find that. And as you said today, when we can put our CVs and our resumes together, the more things that we can add to our skill set, the more likely it is that we have greater opportunity going forward, maybe even to create our own business, or maybe it's even to be a philanthropist of some sort. But it's learning those individual pieces. You may not want to be a web designer full time. That may not be what you want to do. But if you can learn those concepts and how that maybe relates to your particular area of social media development, then that's helpful. It's another skill set, and it's another way that you can understand and communicate to an audience that you might not have had before. And I think that those are just great skills to have, and I definitely think that that's a way that we can really build that peer-to-peer piece. Is definitely huge. And just to tag on to that peer-to-peer learning, 71% of the Fortune 500 companies have a mentorship program. And while we don't do a lot of on-the-job training anymore, the reality is what they have found is that mentorship increases retention rate, it increases promotion, it increases better succession capabilities, and all types of further innovation. So having those mentorship programs as part of our collaborative environment is just huge. It definitely helps when it comes to having individuals who've maybe worked in our organizations for maybe 10 or 20 years and have all of that real world experience with the product or service that we have. And then having that new employee who's maybe brand new, right out of university, and doesn't have the real world experience, but maybe has more of the more recent technological or academic knowledge. Bringing those two together so that the employee that's been there can mentor that new person who doesn't have the real world experience but has some knowledge base. Bringing them together, allowing them to share their information, and then mentoring definitely gives you a strength of your environment. We tend to find that we have greater engagement and satisfaction scores within our organizations that have that shared peer-to-peer learning, or the buddy system, or the mentorship programs. And so I think that just adds to what you're saying about how you're working with your team, and how we can make those things better. And we even have technology and software programs. If you're thinking, oh, I don't know how to roll out a mentorship program, that seems really intense. There's actually different. Kronos is a great software that's out there, and it'll help you build your own mentorship program. Whether you're an organization with 4 people or 400 to 4,000 people, it will help you build those. And so there's technology out there that will help us build some of those underlying foundational components that help us to be more collaborative, to be more innovative and inviting as an organization, to be an employer of choice, to have those things, as you said, to be an employee who may leave but say, you know what, everything might not have been perfect there, but they treated me well. I had great mentors there. They helped me learn. They helped me grow. And now I'm where I am now because of the experiences I had with, Corporation X, so to say. And so I think, that learning environment, that mentorship style programming, I think is just a huge piece for being collaborative. I think we may have lost.
Yeah,
No, yeah.
sorry. I think we just had a very quick ditch. We have lots of comments here. I think thank you very much, Dr. Collins and Dr. Marcia, for joining this discussion today. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So I just noticed we have some comments here in the comment box. We have comments from Dr. Collins. He's saying some leaders may not collaborate, but instead use their authority to manage their team. What actions would you take if faced with this situation in your department?
So I think that's always a consideration when you're looking at leaders or managers who want to control or have maybe that micromanagement approach to the teams rather than encouraging them. And I think that begins with certainly your HR process and onboarding, and more specifically, how you train your leaders. And I think, as most of you probably are aware, just because someone performs well in their role or well within a particular department does not necessarily mean that they're going to be the most efficient and effective leader for that department. And I think that we have to consider that when we promote people. I love having a great succession plan within the organization, but I think that we also have to be aware that not everyone is going to be the type of leader that you need just because they can perform well within a department. They may know every aspect of that department. They may have been with your company for 20 years. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to lead all of your current and future employees in a way that you would like. And so I think that first and foremost, you take that into consideration when you're looking to place someone in that leadership role. Maybe this is just an ad hoc role to manage a specific team. Maybe it's not a formal leadership role, but it's an ad hoc role. But I think that you need to consider the personality and the strengths of that individual, their work style, and how they communicate with you as maybe a CEO, or maybe with others as their peers or colleagues. How does that communication style happen? I think that we have to give that type of consideration before we place someone in a position of leadership, so that we don't have that. What we don't want is to have leaders that are solely looking out for their own point of view. If you have someone who's just looking to climb a ladder to make the next step up, obviously that's not going to be ideal for your team, and ultimately not ideal for your organization. So I definitely think that the very first step when you're assigning someone as a leader, whether it's an ad hoc leader or whether it's a formal leader in the form of a manager or a CEO or a director, I think that has to be part of that selection process, is how well do they work with their peers. 360 feedback is a great way to do that when you get feedback from other people who have worked with them. Certainly part of your performance improvement or your annual evaluation process, 360 feedback can be a great way to do that. But I think that you certainly have to take into consideration who you're selecting to be in those leadership roles, knowing what their desired outcome is, knowing how well they have worked with others in the past when they weren't leaders. I think that that's key. But for me, that's the things that I have thought about when I'm selecting a team leader. I definitely want to look at those. If I happen to have a team leader who is maybe not doing their best at managing the team, or maybe is being a little bit more micromanagement oriented, or maybe a little more authoritarian in the way that they handle it, then I encourage the CEO, the supervisor, the director, whoever is their direct report, whoever they speak to, is to actually have that open conversation with them, and to not only do that in a way that is criticizing, but to do it in a constructive way, to help them to grow. Maybe they don't realize that they're being authoritarian. Maybe they don't realize the way in which they come across. They may not realize that their tone, based on where they come from, based on their culture, based on maybe they don't realize that that tone is perceived in this environment as being offensive or being overly aggressive. And so having those conversations, if you have someone in that role and you don't think that they're producing what you would like to see, then have that conversation, have that in an open and transparent way, and try to help them grow beyond where they are, if that is possible. If it's not possible, then you can always remove that person from the leadership aspect, maybe put them into a different role that's better suited for them, and place someone else in that role that would be better for your teams. But ultimately, you want to make sure that you're creating an environment that is positive, that is supportive. And even for that person who might be leading, who may not be leading in the way that you'd like, there are definitely ways to improve that. If you didn't do it on the front end, then certainly as you have them in that role, to be very upfront with them about that, to have that dialogue, and then to do that mentorship, which I think is extremely important, and do those additional pieces of training so that maybe you can correct something that they may not even realize is an issue.
Thank you for that insight. Before I come back, because I would like us to share more insight on micromanagement, because I know micromanagement is always a very big problem for most leaders, trying to always want to know every detail. Sometimes you just have to let the details and just trust the teams to be able to do their job, and which is something I'm also learning this period. I'm also trying my best to also learn that and not always want to put my nose on every details of information. But before that, please, to everyone who's listening to the discussion today, if you're here alone, like I said, please feel free to share the link across, send it to your WhatsApp status, share with your friends, and make sure you have everyone join us today. And also, this is me making a request on behalf of all of my team, because the past 2 weeks we've been carrying on a process to carefully share out and extract information from all of our podcasts to share with you, our audience. So please, whenever any of them reaches out to you, and you're able to connect with them anytime they reach out to you, please do well to follow up with them. They might be asking some questions for feedback, for survey, just to understand how you've been able to follow up on our discussions on all of our contents on social media. And if you also want to have further conversations, you can as well join us in our community, which will share the link also attached to this conversation today. But thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in, and I'm trusting that we're having the best discussion so far. So back to our conversation on collaborative networking, right? So how do you or what advice do you give for leaders in terms of micromanagement for them to always allow their teams to grow and still trust them to also do the best as they've been instructed to?
Well, I think we talked just briefly about setting forth the vision and the goals and expectations at the very outset. If you've done that as a leader, and if you have open communication with your teams, then I think it's extremely important that we allow our team members, if we've hired the person that we believe is competent and capable to do the role, then we need to allow them to do that. If we find at some point that they are struggling with a particular aspect within our organization, then again, that's part of creating that continuous learning environment so that we can come in up underneath them, support them, and help them to grow and develop and to gain that skill set that maybe they don't have or maybe isn't as strong as we'd like for it to be. One of the things that I think we tend to find as leaders, we tend to we think, we can do it best. We know how it needs to be done. So we want to have direct oversight of every single piece. And the reality is that just isn't a good process for anyone. It's not good for us as leaders. It's not good for our teams. And in order to lessen that feeling or that need to micromanage, I think that we have to learn to let go. It's not any different than letting our children go when they leave home after high school and go off to university or whatever their next role is. But we have to learn to trust that the things that we've instilled within them, if we've given them a vision, if we've given them a set of goals and a set of parameters, that they will follow that we've hired people who are capable. And part of leading a group is to allow them and to to do those things that they do well, and to understand that we all make mistakes. Mistakes are going to happen. That's part of the growth. That's part of how we learn. That's part of how we then create from that and how we innovate. And I think if, as leaders, we can understand that allowing them to do the things that they do well, allowing us to all grow as a group from things that maybe don't go as well as we would have liked, um, there are better opportunities within that growth perspective than there are within standing over them, micromanaging them to the point that they become burnt out, they don't find the work meaningful, they leave, and then where are you then? So I think that micromanagement tends to create so many issues for the organization, for us as leaders, for our employees. Micromanagement tends to take the engagement and satisfaction out of the workplace. It tends to make us less astute in the decisions that we make, and definitely tends to lengthen the time that it takes us to produce an end result that we really want. And so as we can work with our teams, allow them autonomy, give them iterative feedback. If you have that great relationship with your team, if you can create that feeling of communication, that open door policy where you are readily available to them, you won't have to micromanage them. You'll tend to find, at least I have found over time, is that with that open communication, employees tend to, they're excited to share with you what's happening. They're excited to tell you where they've gotten to. They're excited to tell you that, hey, guess what? We're 2 days ahead of where we're supposed to be. You won't have to micromanage them if you can come underneath them and support them, give them that autonomy, give them that iterative feedback so that they know that they're doing well, that they are valued. They're going to work harder to deliver more because they know that it's being appreciated. You're going to find that your teams perform better for you if you approach it in that way.
Thank you very much. And I'm hoping that everybody who's listening today will learn not to micromanage every of their team member, and as well leave them to always make mistakes and get corrected, because in making mistakes, you get to grow. If you don't try, I'm not sure would actually learn, right? So in trying, we'll also continue to learn. So I just want to draw us a little bit back to yesterday, myself and Robyn, we had a discussion preparing for today's conversation, right? So we're on the basis of talking about collaboration, right? Is collaboration only for the organizations to, prepare their team members to always do the job and get the work done? How are organizations equally helping the team members, right, to also go out there to spread the words of the organization, not the wider audience always seeing the organization only from the eyes of the leader? How are the audience also seeing the organization from the eyes of the employees, from the eyes of the team members, right? So I would also like us to have detailed information here today, because that is something that I'm very much interested in, which also Robyn is also very much interested in. So in talking about collaboration, in your own concept, how have you seen organizations, or are there any organizations maybe you've known that are putting these practices into use carefully and using that to grow and also growing both the organizations and their team members?
Now, I think we tend to think about, when we talk about collaborative networks, we think about collaborative teams within our own organization. And the reality is that the work that we do, and ultimately the products and services that we deliver, we're reaching outside of that organization. Whether it's a vendor, whether it's maybe a partner, maybe it's another organization, maybe it's even a competitor, but we are definitely not just creating an environment within our organization for collaboration, but hopefully what that becomes is this intuitive process for our organization so that we become collaborative outside of the organization. This enables us, I think, the better that we do it, the better we develop a collaborative environment within. It helps us to also build that collaborative network capability outside of. So I think probably an organization, or at least a partnership that we can all kind of at least have heard of, is the International Space Station. Each one of the organizations involved in that have their own processes. They have their own teams, their own collaboration, their own collaborative network, but they came together to do something monumental, something huge, something beyond themselves and beyond one system or one country. And I think that that's and do really well. But then if we do that and perfect that within our own organization, how we can then market that and partner with other organizations to create something even bigger and better than what we have done alone. And I think about the International Space Station, and when I think about those terms, because what it means to collaborate outside of our organization, because that's a great, you have countries that aren't even allies who actually participate in that, right? They have organizations that have networked together and partnered together so that they can produce information for all of us so that we can learn and grow as humanity. And that, to me, is a great way to think about how an organization can develop internal networks and internal collaborations so that it can then be used to bring peers together on the outside to work well together and to produce things that are great for not just those organizations, but for all of us as humanity, as all of us as citizens of the world. That's what they're doing. They're producing information for us to learn from, to grow from. And I think that there are other things. If you're into computers, if you're into technology, if you've used Linux at all, the Linux framework is a great way to kind of look at collaboration. Within Linux itself, you had teams that came together, different perspectives, and then they opened it up to an open platform where multiple people from all over the world with all different perspectives and capabilities for coding and those kind of things, they brought all of that together to make that Linux operating system one of the more prolific ones out there, and it's the most prolific one out there when it comes to open sourcing. And again, that was done through collaboration. That was done through organizing teams and how they would set a foundation for those different independent individuals to come in and give information into what was a close-knit team within Linux itself. So when you think about why is collaboration important? Why is networking important? Well, because it can help you grow your reach. It can help you grow your messaging platform. It can help you advance where you currently are with a product or service and take it to the next level. Linux is a great example of that. The International Space Station, great examples of that. Very different people from very different parts of the globe coming together with a single team, then creating multiple teams to create something bigger than themselves. And I think that's some things that we could keep in mind about how we can use our internal process to impact an external event or an external outcome.
Wow. That's a very insightful to share. And mentioning key aspects like open source and Linux organization itself. But to everyone listening to these, the whole essence of having this discussion, like we had mentioned earlier, is for each individual organization to see how to build a global brand, right? And I know all what Robyn has shared with us might not really be very it might not be what do you call it, a wake up step to just wake up and start implementing, right? But I want to understand this. How is it easy to implement that process? Yes, we've talked about how team can work internally, because now what we're doing right now is extending the benefits the teams are getting, the benefits they're getting, the benefits the employees are getting. They're also reflecting it in the wider society, in the wider community, which will also likely attract good employees, right? Good employment. People always reach out to you to want to work with the organization, reach out to you to maybe want to partner or collaborate, like you've mentioned. So but before they got into all of these things, what were those challenges that they faced? I think organizations face before they build that process to make it solid and stay strong for them.
Well, I think if I'm understanding correctly, you're asking me like how are we overcoming those obstacles to get to that point?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think we talked a lot about the different the values, the responsibilities that we create within our teams, and making sure that we've communicated things clearly. I think that what's really important as we're creating these environments and as we're creating these collaborative teams is to keep in mind that you can start small. You don't have to roll out your collaborative team today and say it's 100% done, it's 100% finished, but you can start small in how you decide to develop a team. Maybe you want multiple teams throughout your organization, but maybe you start with one. Maybe you start with a project that's smaller and you begin to work out the details of how that evolves within this smaller project, and then build from there. I think that a lot of times we tend to try to eat the whole elephant at the same time instead of taking just one bite, right? So you can take that piece, and I think a comment I made to you before, where there's a will, there's a way. If it is your desire to build a collaborative process and a collaborative environment, you don't have to make the whole company that environment today. You can start with one project. You can start with one small team. You can work out the process for that team development and how you're going to do it so that you become more in tune with how to maybe make that process bigger and how to make that process roll within your own organization. Maybe it's within a single department. Maybe it's not even the whole organization at first. But if you can take those small things, those small wins, and then celebrate that with your team. Don't just say Team A delivered product X for us. Well, say, well, Jimmy, Rachel, and Robbie, they were part of this team. This is what they did. This is how they did it. And you roll that out and you support that and you reward their achievement. You do that by valuing the input that they gave, valuing the output that you gave, and then that instills within your other employees the fact that being on a team is a positive thing, that integrating and sharing communication is a great thing. Then they can go to that first team that you've created and say, hey, tell me about it. What was that process like? It builds the interest. It builds the momentum. It becomes the catalyst for helping you divide and to build something even bigger than that first one. And I think that that's really important. I think that it's important that we know we don't have to have the whole thing figured out today. We don't have to have the whole enterprise on board today. We can start with one piece and build on that. And as we build that firm foundation, we can add a step to it, one step at a time, until we get to that height that we want to reach. That's the way you climb a mountain. You don't get to the top on the first day. So if you're going to climb that, then you develop those pieces. And I think that that's a huge thing to keep in mind. It helps us to keep from being overwhelmed. It helps us to put it into context, and it helps us to build momentum in a way that I think is really constructive.
Thank you for that response. So we just got a question from the audience, Dr. Collins. Thank you for your question. It's saying, dialogue is key, helping the team to dialogue. What method do you use to approach this for a team that is not so open, to get them open and collaborating with themselves? I know you shared some of these, but maybe you can just go in-depth information on this.
One of the things that I've seen used before that works really well, if they're not openly communicating with one another, sometimes you can initiate dialogue with you as the leader, in which you ask for feedback on a particular question or a particular set of issues that you're having. And then you get that feedback, bring them together as a group, and you don't have to even identify who gave what specific feedback, but give that feedback to them in an open format and ask them for input, and you give input as well. Sometimes in doing that, you can stimulate that conversation, letting them know, most importantly, that they're in a safe environment, that they're not going to be targeted because of the things they say, or they're not going to be ostracized because they had a different point of view. I think that definitely comes from a leadership down perspective, and definitely giving them an environment where they know that their feedback is appreciated from you. So when you ask those questions initially, you give them that feedback so that they feel comfortable and safe with you in having that type of feedback. And then slowly but surely beginning to implement that team, those different team members together in conversations with you. Again, if they trust you as their leader, it will begin to help bring that trust factor into the team that you've selected. And I think that you can share that information with them as they dialogue with you and they have that trust. And you say, I've chosen each of you because I trust in each of you. I trust in your abilities. And what I'd like is for us to all have this open dialogue, and then begin to initiate that open dialogue. And maybe you don't do it with a whole team of 20 people at once. Maybe you do that with a couple of people first, and then a few more, and then a few more. But I think as you do that, and as you set the example, and as you set that trust factor, I think that that can definitely help. A lot of times, I tend to find that employees that are brought into a group, especially if they're interdisciplinary and they don't even know each other, they find it hard to openly communicate right away. They don't know anything about one another. Sometimes you can do an icebreaker as a leader. Sometimes there are definitely team development things that you can do within your organization that can help build some of that. Things like the knot, or there's this thing called the human knot. There's different ways that they have to depend on one another to create a particular outcome. It's fun, and it's a way to help them build trust or to learn more about one another. The social media wall, I've seen that done in a couple of different companies that I've worked with. One of the airports that I worked with recently did this. They were trying to build a new team, and so everybody's involved in social media. But what they did was they created this cork board in which they built this social media presence, so to speak, only it was physical. And so each of the team members would they were required to bring in something new to post on that board every week. And the cool thing about that was it got them talking to each other. It wasn't necessarily about the work, but talking to each other about things that they liked. They began to find things that they enjoyed, together. And it's like, oh wow, you like that baseball team. Oh wow, you like this particular Olympic event. You like this type of music. Oh my gosh, you have kids. I had kids too, so I have grandkids, whatever. But as they began to do that, they began to talk more toward one another. So that social media board was a way to get them talking with one another about these different things. The leader actually came in and said, hey, whose picture is this? Oh, this is great. Did you know about X, Y, or D? Telling a story. We find that telling stories tends to engage others, right? And so then they give input. We found that what ended up happening with our team when we did that was that they began to call each other up, but in the afternoons, maybe even after work, and say, hey, I had this idea about the project we're working on. What do you think about it? They began to interact more both at work and outside of work in a way that was productive. It helped them feel more comfortable. It helped our team actually move our project further along. But that was a great way to do it. It's one thing to say, go look up everybody's Facebook. It was something different to see it on this big cork board where we're all putting up all these different things that interested us, or sometimes it was a funny quote. Sometimes they were inspirational quotes. Sometimes it was a picture of a grandkid or a puppy. But it had this ability to bring that team together and to bring them together in a way that didn't feel like it was something being graded. It wasn't something that, oh, this is part of our project, so I've got to be really over professional. It gave them a way to start a dialogue that then made internal work dialogue easier. And so that's just one suggestion, but it was something that I saw that I thought was really great. It worked really well in that organization. It brought a lot of people together, and it actually ended up being one of their they ended up taking that and showing it to their board of directors about, that ended up being one of the most fun things they did throughout that whole project alignment, was getting to learn about one another, getting to learn things that they didn't know, or they might have never known because they worked in different departments. So they weren't ever together other than for that project. So that was a great way to start it. So those are things that I could maybe suggest to help you start dialogue. It's not maybe ultra natural, but it's one of the things that worked well for us. And you can do that on Loom as well. You can do that through video. You don't have to do it on a cork board, but they did it that way because it worked well for them.
Was it what do you call it? A remote-based company, or is it a remote-based company or on site?
It was hybrid. So they had both. Yeah, so it was hybrid. And that was part of the issue between them being able to really feel comfortable talking with one another. I think their communication styles. And so they had that cork board. So they had the one day in the office and the rest of the day was out. But on the days that were in the office, they would bring those different pieces, and then they had the collaborative piece at the end of the project where all of that information is together. But one of the things that they did was that cork board they would bring and put those pieces on. When they had their Zoom meetings, that was one of the videos that was shown throughout the whole time. There was a camera on that cork board so that they could see it and talk about it and have that interlinked communication. A couple of them used Loom and did some videos of different things. They did TikTok dance. They did all kinds of stuff. But they really began to make it fun so that the work piece wasn't so tense. They found a way to communicate in a way that was easy for them and that then enabled them to communicate better through work. And I really loved that idea. I thought it was really spectacular that they did that. They were able to develop a really new product for their business and did really well with that. But the communication that happened through that process, those team members were actually volunteering to do additional teams for other things that they thought could be improved in the organization. Gosh, it doesn't get any better than that, right? Having your team members want to be on a team so that they can make things better for you.
Yeah.
So that's a way to do it.
You know, actually, right now, I'm thinking. I know we've run out of a time, but can you share with us maybe simple steps on how to maybe duplicate this in a remote settings? I know that's more of hybrid. They still have some time to get to see themselves. Our audience might say, "Oh, but what about those who are working remote? How do we foster that to also bring it on board to the same organization too?" Remote.
Yes, I think if you're really remote, there's a lot of tools out there. You can there's Slack, there's Teams, there's Asana, which is a project management software. There's Loom. There's various different pieces of technology out there where you can bring your teams together, where you can work on a project, and where you can communicate. And I think that you can use some of those things. Slack is a great one. Asana is a great one. But to use those so that if they're remote, you can still put those bits and pieces. You can upload them as documents in those platforms, and so that those documents can be seen. So it may not be all on a corkboard, but you can upload those documents and have it in a team chat or team chat of documents so that people can see it. You can always do an independent page on Facebook, so you could actually do it that way if you wanted to use social media as a remote platform. There's various ways that you can do that, but you can do it within your own resources that you have at work, such as Slack or Teams or Zoom or Asana or one of those project management softwares where you can upload those pieces, and the teams can actually send back forth questions or comments, or implement that same sort of environment that you did with the corkboard or this company did with their corkboard, but do it in a remote environment using the technology and software that we have today. And I think you still get the same sort of outcome.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I think we have a comment here from an audience trying to re-emphasize on what you said, saying collaboration, as I understand from your explanation, is that you engage with a team by working as part of the team to win together, not working against them or standing or just being a manager and just managing a process.
Exactly. I think the most effective managers are part of the team. Many decades ago, just so you guys know, I've been around for more than a few years. But there used to be this term called management by walking around, and what they intended by that, we referred to that a lot when it came to hospital executives, was there was always this idea that the hospital CEO was up in some big office somewhere and nobody ever saw them. And then there became this trend where they would actually walk and be on the floor and meet the physicians and meet the patients and meet the employees and be seen and be part of. And that is something that's always stuck with me. With any group that I manage, with any team that I've ever had, I want to be part of the team. Even if I may be the CEO, it doesn't mean that I have to lead every team, but I can still be part of a team. I can still give input. I can still give context. I can still support, and I can still bring resources to bear as a team leader. And I think that that's so very important, because again, if you can support that team, if you can, you don't have to always lead that team to support that team. And I think that they need to see that and understand that. I think that builds trust. I think that builds rapport. That's where mentorship comes into play. And I think that you can be an active mentor without having to actually lead the team, even if you are the boss of the team, if that makes sense. So I think, definitely keeping those things in mind, but definitely being part of the team, is just, for me, it's always been an integral part of achieving the goals that we really want to achieve, and achieving that mentorship that you want, that support that you want, so that your employees really feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, that they're appreciated and that they're valued.
Thank you very much, Robyn, for that. And before we close up on this discussion today, first, to everybody who's listening, on and Now with the Manager, we have a very big announcement, which is us making plans to start producing magazines, right? But we don't know how that is going to look like. So I know a lot of people have been asking. I made a post yesterday, and I was like, I made a bet for myself, but I didn't know what I was saying. But along the line, you realize that when you start a process, right, you get to explore different aspects. When you keep collaborating, like talking about today, when you keep collaborating with a team, when you keep engaging with them, you realize that you being the mastermind, you'll be exposed to different ideas, and coming up with what they call it, magazine sales, is one of those ideas which I think will be able to work out for us. But you, our audience, will let us know which aspect of these magazines will work the best for. So please, in the comment section, we have a survey, a waiting list link. Please, when you click on that link, you just answer a few questions, include your name if you'd like to join our waiting list, and also let us know how interested you would be to have a piece of that magazine. It's going to be a weekly magazine for us to educate ourselves and continue to learn and have valuable information in all we do. So before we close up on today's discussion again, I would like our guests to, because she said she shared a very interesting story with me when we were having a backstage talk, and it's something I think I would like you all to also be aware of. I'm talking about where she is currently. That's in Louisiana, right? And the amazing things that the farmers are actually doing there, and trying to tie that today into collaboration and how they are planning for succession. Planning for succession ahead of time, planning for their grandkids ahead of time. I don't really get much of that from so many farmers today. But please, talk to us. How is that experience helping you to also shape your business process and your work so far?
Yes, definitely. I live in an area that's about 800 acres here, farmland. And so one of the things that has really struck me in watching these farmers in this local community, we have some of them who receive government subsidies. We have some that are still private. But the one thing that I've really noticed is that I use my dad as an example. I have farmers in their 70s, but they're using technology. So they, to get the most use out of their land, they use GPS so that every inch can be used to its best capacity and can be utilized in a way that is that where it can be used in a way that really benefits not only the farmer themselves, but the community. So they use technology. One of the things that I think is so cool about what they do now is I have a family of farmers that live not too far from me, and one of the fields that they have is sweet corn, and they grow it every year. And when they harvest that corn, the profits of that go back into an education fund for their grandchildren. So I think a lot of people, when they hear of farming and produce and those kind of things, they think of old world ideas of what farming is. They don't realize that the tractor that's out in front of me today that's harvesting the soybeans in front of me is about $200,000. It's completely enclosed and completely computerized. There's no steering wheel. It's computerized. It maps out the land. It digs based on the best utilization of space for all the rows. They're using technology. So they may be in their 70s, but they're using technology. And they're doing that because as their kids and grandkids are growing up, they're receiving education in those areas of technology, and they're embracing it. And I think that that's just phenomenal. To me, that's collaboration, right? That's collaboration from the boomer generation all the way down to the millennial generation and even the newer ones, right? They're collaborating knowledge and processes to produce these goods. I love being able to go to the market. So they sell off to big granaries, but they also have a local market. I love that idea within our own little community. But I think the farming here has just really taken, I guess, my view of what an organization is like and realized that these organizations are particular family farmers and groups, but they come together. If they need to build a barn, if they need to, if a farmer is sick and they need to get their crops out of the ground before it rains on them too heavy or before they lose them, then they come together and they get it all out so that they can get it to the farm, so that the individual farmer does okay, so that the community does okay, and they pull their strengths together. They collaborate. They bring their equipment together. That's how we talked about using resources in our organizations and bringing those together so we can be efficient and effective. That's what they do here. And it's just in a very different perspective. I'm looking at hospitals and international airports, and those are the people but I'm looking at farmers who are doing something very, very similar to what we talked about today. How do they work together within their family? How do they work outside of that family with other farmers? And then how do they put that food on our tables as consumers? And I just think that's phenomenal. It really gives me a different perspective. It was something I loved getting to see, and how they used what they're doing to succession plan, to train their children, their grandchildren who will take over these large farms someday, and how they're going to do it even better. So, yeah.
Well, how did that help HG Blackmon Limited? How did I help the organization? How did it also help shape you as the CEO of that organization?
I think it helped a lot, and helped me to see things again. You know, we talk about wanting to have diversity of thought and diversity of perspective. It gave me that. It gave me an increased diversity of perspective in what I thought an organization was, what I thought an organization could be, and what I thought networking was and what it can be. And I think because of the environment that I came from, I always thought of organizations as these big companies, these big events. While I'm very aware that you can have smaller organizations, it isn't that. But I think I thought of them much more in this great business context, this commercial capitalism context. I wasn't thinking about it from this local community farming context, and it helped me to see a different perspective. It helped me to see what it looks like to be an organization who's always been successful, but is trying to be sustainable in an ever-changing world. And I think that seeing what they do here in farming currently, and how they're trying to be recognize the value of our earth, and how they can protect it, and how they can better utilize it in a way that is not so damaging. The things that they're trying to incorporate so that they can be sustainable as an entity, because we have to have food, obviously, but how they can be sustainable as an organization, but move forward in a positive way. And it helped me to see that from their perspective, and then how the things that we do from that more global perspective, for whether it's a healthcare institution, whether it's an international airport, whether it's a legal firm, or maybe it's a clothing manufacturer, but how we're all looking for ways to improve the things that we do to be successful and sustainable. And I think that was one of the things that really stuck with me, was how we succession plan, what that looks like in different organizations, what that looks like with this group of farmers, what it looks like within a hospital system. But it really helped me to see that from a very different level, from a very grassroots level, I think. And I think that that's very important, to sometimes walk out of the office building, walk out of the high rise, and to see things from a grassroots level. I think it can definitely give you a very realistic and human perspective of the things that are happening in our world, and the way that we can impact how those things happen.
Thank you for sharing in depth of that. And lastly, before we go, please talk to us. Why are you so very much interested in the quotes, when you have the will, there is always a way?
It's actually a phrase that my grandmother used, and my mother as well, but I have found it to be true throughout my life. If you have the will to do it, you can find the way to do it. It doesn't mean that things are always going to be easy. It doesn't mean that you're always, as I said before, we may not build a whole enterprise full of collaborative teams today, but we can start with one. If that's our will and that's our desire, we can start with one, and we can build from there. And I thoroughly believe in that. I believe our passion for the things that we do, our dreams, that definitely puts within us the will to accomplish things. And I think that we have a greater set of resources that provide us with all types of information so that we can make that will a reality. And so I'm definitely one that believes if there's a will, there's a way. You can make it happen. Believe in yourself, believe in your teams, support your teams together. I think that you can definitely make it happen, even if it's one step at a time. Even if you have mistakes and you have the setbacks, I've had many, believe me, I've had many. And but there's definitely a way. You can find the way to make it work. You can find a way to make it happen. And then when you accomplish those goals, celebrate those goals, because I think that that's a huge thing. I think a lot of times we run right past that. We get it done and then we move on to the next thing. But we should remember to celebrate the things that we do and that we've accomplished, because that's important, and that builds the momentum for the next thing that we're going to do. But where there's a will, there's a way.
Okay. Emphasis on always celebrate what you win. Thank you very much, Robyn. Thank you very much for the time you spent with us. I think we've even gotten 15 minutes into our initial agreement, but thank you very much. Thank you very much to our audience, Dr. Marcia, Dr. Collins, and everybody who's commenting and engaging on this discussion. I really much appreciate everyone who's joining from YouTube or Twitter or LinkedIn. I really much appreciate this. This is an Hour with a Manager Live podcast. Every Thursday by 8 p.m., we have a discussion, we have a conversation, we have a guest who is here to share and educate us with step-by-step information. Please do also always follow, engage, and connect with us. And like I shared earlier, we have a waitlist link. If you're interested in knowing or being a part of our magazine and knowing what the magazine will look like, please do also follow up on that link, and let's get to hear from you. You can also leave your email behind so that we can get to talk and get to share more information. But be rest assured, and Now with the Manager is here to stay, and we're going to continue to share the best quality information. And don't worry, soon we're having probably I'll have to be with Robyn in Louisiana to sit down one-on-one to have a physical discussion where you also watch us live. But for now, we just have to manage and bear with the glitches we have once in a while. But hopefully we'll be out of that soon. But thank you very much, everybody, for the time. And we're looking forward to see you guys next week. Thank you very much, Dr. Robyn, for being an amazing guest.
Thank you very much.
How, but the all insights you've shared so far is breathtaking. And I'm sure we have a very, very satisfied audience today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Before we close up on this, do you have any last word for our audience?
No, other than I hope that at least a few of the items that we talked about, you can find a way to integrate those into your world and where you practice. More than anything, I wish you blessings for the day, and stay tuned. We're going to have a book that's coming out in the fall, and I look forward to talking with you guys again if I'm given that opportunity. But have a great weekend.
Yes, of course. Please stay tuned with Dr. Robyn. She has a book coming up, a very educative book, a very, very interesting book that can share more insights with you. So please do well to connect. We will continue to have this conversation next week, Thursday. Good night, good morning, or good evening from wherever you're joining us from. Bye.
Bye.